thing this radio station has done to this island.
Do you think, Kez, that the general way that the general people in Malta feel towards the LGBT community, do you think that is changing? Do you think this is why this law for equal marriage opportunity, do you think that's why that's been passed? Is the actual mood of the general population changing towards gay people? Is it becoming more accepting?
I think it's becoming more accepting now on that island compared to what it was years ago. But I've been talking to the old LGBT in Malta. You'll reach out to the older ones as well. I mean, as Jason, you know, I'm trained in LGBT counselling, especially for this particular project with the Maltese radio station. So I come basically as a radio presenter and support. So when I go to Ireland, I will go to my LGBT community where I can't do in the UK. It's a shame I've never been able to be. I'm a radio presenter, as everybody knows, with Keza. I love to be out there. I love to be out with my people. I love to be with my LGBT people. I love to interview them. I love to support them. Because I think that's the most important. The younger generation need a support, because I never had a support in my younger generation, so when I was younger. So I always look when my London community supported me when I needed them. When my own community, my own area, didn't.
That's why I came to London, yes.
That's why London's always been in my heart and Malta's always been in my heart. And I think that's why I've set this radio station up for, because it's helping the community, it's helping our younger generation and our older generation around the world, not just Malta.
Did you find any negativity when you in Malta, didn't you? And you was one of the first gay couples to get blessed in Malta. Did you find any negative vibes?
When we first went, me and Mary went to Malta, after our civil partnership in the United Kingdom, surprisingly enough, I was quite nervous going as a gay man for the very first time. I've always been, as a young child, growing up on the island back and forth from the UK. So I've always found it kind of strange at first to see these young guys. I mean, Tombar, I'll explain when you go over there, it was like going back in generations right to the 1960s, where they're actually going in the bushes and doing things. I'd rather be honest, on the radio station, these are kind of things.
So like the cruising scene was still big there before, was it? So
it was kind of.
It was people were closeted, were they?
It was closeted. I was talking to one of the old guys about when I was in there December before Kelly arrived in Malta. I was outside having coffee with one of the older guys. You won't mind because people listen on the radio, and it was hearing the stories. It was kind of hidden. In the 1940s, Tombar, our British Navy guys used to go down to Tombar. It was known for gay men. And it still was till about a couple of years, until they decided.
Oh, really? Okay, until very recently, yeah?
Until very recently, we started to open up nightclubs and start doing parties to call them parties. Like we know when we used to do it in the 1950s and 60s, we call them parties then. Until you can see... There still has some generations. You'll find the ones our generation when we go out, you'll think they still say parties, and like we used to go say we're going clubbing. That's you know what I mean? We're going clubbing, or we're going to the club, or we're going to Silhouettes or Heaven, or.
You know, I've recently been in the Simon Napier Bell movie, 50 Years Legal, and to listen to the stories that the older queens had to tell. Obviously, I mean, we take for granted in London. You know how easygoing people are these days. Obviously, there's still hate crime and there's still some terrible things going on. But I think we do take for granted our freedom as gay individuals in a town as cosmopolitan as London. But listening to the old queens on the 50 years legal, because obviously this year it is 50 years since homosexuality was partially decriminalised in the UK. Obviously, Malta are now catching up with us, especially having same-sex marriage and stuff, which is just fantastic. I'm very proud that they've managed to push that through this year. So I guess when you was a young lad going to Malta and stuff, that it must have been a bit like, as you say, like a time like with the old queens talking about their stories from 50 years ago.
You'll love it. You'll love it. You'll sit and you'll talk to them. And I mean, you've got some of the old queens in there already in the UK. Look at Billy. Look at Roxy in Manchester.
Billy, is that the drag queen that does the Queen?
Yeah, Billy. You think of Billy. You think of Roxy in Manchester. And you think of all the ones we know ourselves. I've been there to Malta before us. So
well, the funny thing, I mean, talking of old queens, when I went to, I was saying more mature queens rather than old queens. But obviously, I've just come back from doing a few gigs at Brighton Pride, and I was staying with Maisie Trollet.
Amazing.
Maisie's 84 years young now.
I can't believe Maisie. My grandmother knew Maisie.
She's a more mature lady, and she's 80 years young now. So 84 years young, sorry. And we did.
I can't believe that. I was
looking all her friends doing songs for her, which was fabulous.
I couldn't believe it. It was when I was watching that. Great, absolutely great. Because Maisie knew my grandmother. So it was just seriously.
Really? Okay.
Because my nan was in the theatre industry, so she worked for Danny Rue, she knew Maisie, she knew all the old queens, seriously. So I grew up with all the old queens.
Residency in London singing every Wednesday was at Danny Rue's bar in...
That's right. I grew up with all these people, so I was literally the baby of literally loads of them. So when she passed away...
Was your grandmother in the industry? Was she in the entertainment?
My nan was very much involved back at the industry. So basically, she was we call the fag hags of that generation. So you can imagine basically in the performing arts industry, she worked in the theatre. So basically, they used to go to her. When her husband died, my grandfather died very young. So she got a job in the theatre industry. So the way she met her friends was through gay men.
Well, it would be, wouldn't it, in the theatre, obviously.
So she was behind the bar, working backstage with Tommy Cooper, with Danny LaRue, with Maisie. So all these people she came across in her whole life. So when she passed away, because I was brought up in the performing arts with my cousin's also a TV presenter, so I've always grown up in the theatre industry. So when she passed away, she told she had cancer in the middle of Manchester with Auntie Lee. And Lee found out, everybody found out, all my friends found out. And she said, don't tell anybody, you look after me. So I looked after her through a whole process. But when she died of cancer, the whole of the gay community came out. All the old queens. So I disappeared to Blackpool because I couldn't cope with anything. And one day, a guy knocked on my door, this old queen, in the hotel, found me on Facebook. He said, I knew your grandmother. And it was Danny Rue's ex-agent.
Oh, was it really? Okay, yeah.
And he said to me, your grandmother was the most loveliest person we met. She really gave us support. And when we needed somebody to talk to, she was really understanding.
Yeah.
So it all came out. And I always remember going and seeing all these guys when I used to go to Blackpool. And I wondered why I had so many uncles.
Well, funny you should say that. You made me laugh now because when I first came out, 16, 17, and I met, we talk about Maisie Trollet, and when I met Maisie, she used to say to me, tell people I'm your uncle and you're my nephew. And that was the same that's what everyone used to do years ago, didn't they? And then Brian Ralph, who was the producer of, that I do pantomime every year in Brighton. Oh, big shout out to everybody listening in Brighton, by the way. We've got lots of listeners in Brighton tonight, even though we're broadcasting to Malta. A lot of my Facebook listeners are in Brighton, so I just want to say a little hello to them. But Brian Ralph, who was the big theatre agent down in Brighton, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, was a darling friend of mine. He used to take me to the casino, and he used to say, tell people that you're my nephew. That's nice. His nephew, but it was so sweet. But that was, it's funny, it's like naughty but nice, wasn't it, years ago?
It was.
The old queens really looked after the young lads that came out.
Yeah.
And they might have fancied you or whatever, but that kind of was part of the territory. But the old queen sort of became your family as well. I mean, I'm lucky because I've got a wonderful family, and I know you come from a lovely family as well. But not every boy that comes out as gay has got a lovely family. And I think that years ago, the older queens, like Maisie or Brian Ralph or Phil Starr,
Dave Lynn as well. Dave Lynn's
they
another one I've heard.
really took on board like the newer boys coming out and took them under their wing. And so do you think in Malta that the older queens are taking the new ones under their wing a little bit there with this new scene?
Not really this moment. It's quite bad this moment. There's been a split this moment. It's a shame. It's
Right,
a shame.
they're not. Well,
It's
they
a
are.
shame they're not looking at their older ones this moment. They're really not, and it's going to be quite a thing what I'm looking at as well. The younger ones, it's like about our generation, that the younger ones tend to go to us if they're desperate.
Yeah.
In desperate needs. It's still very, very early stages, Jason. You'll see when you go over. It's interesting when you go over, when you'll see. We're going to go over before we do any sort of gigs, any of our listeners in Malta. We are coming to see you as a radio station.
But what concerns me, like especially after doing this movie with Simon Napier Bell and the book as well, is that this generation coming out now, the young teens, I just keep on finding they just get swept up in the gay scene. I mean, the London gay scene has got very sex party, drug orientated,
dark.
and we seem to have somehow let a bit of the community slip away in London, and I think it is a shame. I don't think it's impossible to bring back, but I mean, obviously everyone's got their grinder and it's all fun and whatever. And it is nice that boys can go out with their straight mates and go to straight venues and stuff. But I do think we need to, keep hold of the gay community and a support network for our younger boys and gay girls coming out. And I wonder in Malta if they have that support network, and that's something I'm going to be interested to see when we come over.
Oh, will do. It's going to be absolutely. It's going to. Oh, we've got another good message coming from America. I'm going to say a big shout out to Marky. Marky was a listener at Gay Dar Radio, one of my radio listeners from there, and he was listening to Gay Dar Radio for a couple of years. And welcome to Gay One Radio Malta. It's nice to have you listening to us. But yes, we're going to be talking about more about.
I've just had a message saying if they weren't called uncles or nephews, the boys were always called chickens when you came out.
I was called a chicken. I was always called a chicken.
I was a chicken as well.
I was called chicken at Faith School. I was
you
always
are a spring chicken. What are you talking
Mate,
about?
I know how old. Do you know how old I am now? I am actually 33 now. I'm like an old chicken now. I feel old.
Right, okay, you're 33. I'm 43. So I've got 10 years on you.
I mean, should I tell listeners?
I'm still a spring chicken at heart.
Should I tell you about the listeners what happened to me at work today? When I work in a hotel brand, what am I allowed to say?
Red. I remember you saying, go on.
I was working today at a hotel. I work at a hotel, quite a big branded hotel. I've just got a full-time job with them. So I was just walking around, and this guy came up to the bar, and I was just serving behind the bar with my colleague, and he was just asking me questions. And he said, why did you come back after I started working in the airline industry and also working radio as well? I did 11 years airline industry, 10, 15 years of radio and performing arts, and carried on talking to him. He said, he said, you come to discuss it cost your wife. The next minute, he winked at me. I walked outside because I was checking on some car, something was going on outside in the car park. And he just came up to me straight away and he said, you're gay. And he looked at me in his eyes, and and I just went bright red. My colleague just said, I guess he likes you.
Embarrassed chicken.
I was like an embarrassed chicken. I don't know why.
It must have been a few years since you've been embarrassed, Kez.
Mate, that was the
When I was 16, 17 and with Maisie and Brian Ralph, I used to go bright red. They used to love embarrassing me. And it's funny, actually, because we're talking about Brian Ralph. He took me to the casino one night, and as I say, I had to pretend to be his nephew. I was his token chicken or his glory chicken. And he said, and then we had a little flutter. And things weren't so strict back then with the laws and everything. And he got me some chips onto the table. And we had a little flutter, a little gamble on the casino. And then we won because I had beginner's luck. And then we had a meal after. And when the waiter came round, he was really, really dishy. And we had the food. And then he came in and said, would you like dessert, sir? And Brian said, oh, yes, darling. He said, I'd like spotted dick and custard with plenty of dick. Yeah. And I just remember sitting there and going so bright red that this man had said something like that. And it's obviously it's water for not for duck back these days, but it's funny when you remember these